that we're able to wait, to be patient, to not give up, is part of our faith. How many times when we do something and something, we go through a situation and we want things to get better, and we have to just stay planted in where we are and what we've sown, and we have to wait it out to see the growth. But it's that time and that faith we're able to have as the months progress, as the days, the weeks, the months, or years progress, and see that, okay, now it's better. But at times for me, I tried to do it on my own back in college, and that faith was too little. I picked the fruits too early and tried to do it on my own. Or sometimes you wait too long and it's past when it can be picked. Falls to the ground and it rots. So as going through financial fitness, the law of sowing and reaping, knowing that we sow the seeds, time passes and it's a new season. And then we're able to reap the harvest when it's ready. We're going to look at 2 Kings chapter 4. Because what can we do in this time that we're waiting? What can we do in this time where we've just sown some seeds or we're going through something and we know it may not change anytime soon? And specifically, how can we do this with our finances? Right? So if you don't already know, 2 Kings chapter 4, 1-7 is talking about Elijah and the woman, the small jar of oil. All right? I'm going to read through it all and then we'll go through it. One day, the widow of a member of the group of prophets came to Elijah and cried out, "My husband who served you is dead, and you know he has feared the Lord, but now a creditor has come threatening to take my 2 sons as slaves. What can I do to help you?" Elijah asked. "Tell me, what do you have in the house?" Nothing at all except a flask of olive oil," she replied. And Elijah said, "Borrow as many empty jars as you can from your friends and neighbors. Then go into your house with your sons, shut the door behind you, pour olive oil from your flask into the jars, setting each one aside when it is filled." So she did as she was told. Her sons kept bringing jars to her, and she filled one after another. Soon every container was full to the brim. "Bring me another jar," she said to one of her sons. "There aren't any more," he told her. And the olive oil stopped flowing. When she told the man of God what had happened, he said to her, "Now sell the olive oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on what is left over." And again, what do we do in this time between sowing and reaping, the time before the harvest? And the first one, depending on where we are, is don't blame our situation, don't blame the place we're in, don't blame our problems for the provision that we need. We see this woman that she's going through a tough time. Her husband has passed away, and now the creditors, someone is coming to collect the debt that she owes. And on top of that, her 2 sons are being talked about as the collateral is taken as slaves. And so, again, I want you guys to look at what situation are you in now financially or with your family, whatever it may be. What is that situation now? Because we've sown seeds, we've had our actions before, and we're in a time where there's going to be something to harvest. There's going to be something to reap. What is in between this time? And again, we don't blame the situation for the provisions that we need. And the second part we go into is interesting to see, because Elijah asked, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? Tell me, what do you have? And the woman first says, nothing at all. Nothing at all. For our finance, how many times do we think we know what we need and we know what we have? What we have, what we need, it doesn't match up sometimes. And so when people ask, what do you have? It's easy to respond, well, I don't have anything, because it doesn't match. It doesn't match up. But it's clear to see nothing at all except one tiny jar of oil. One tiny jar of oil. And so again, if you're, whatever the situation, whatever the finances may look like, if it doesn't match up with what you need or the bills that are coming monthly, we still take inventory of what we do have. Take inventory even if it's not enough, even if it's not much. We look at it, we see our bills, and we take inventory and we know where we stand, because the beautiful thing is the next part, or before that, it's what does Elijah do? We see that she's in a financial problem. She's in a situation where she's struggling, and Elijah asks, what do you need? Tell me what you have. And I'm telling you now, God is asking, what do you have? Whether you see it or not, there is something there. To put it into more perspective, the relationships that you have, the friends that you have, the family that you have, the job that you have, it may not be enough, but God is always going to ask, what do you have? And what's, for us, what's that except, but I do have this. But I do have a car, but I do have a home, but I do have a house. There's going to be an except, there's always going to be a but that we can use. And we go down into the next verse where Elijah goes and he says, borrow as many empty jars as you can from your friends and neighbors. Then go into your house, shut the door, pour the olive oil. The next part I want to go to is organized, overwhelmed. We see what we have. We see that it's not enough. We've taken inventory of our finances. We've taken inventory of our family, our characteristics, our love, our joy. We've taken inventory of what we have to give, our seed. And now we see God is asking, Elijah is saying to do something. And I put in perspective, now that we've taken inventory, to organize what we have, to organize all these things that may be problems, things that, the bills that need to be paid, a budget that needs to be made, the debt that's owed, to not just let it be scattered all apart, and it is overwhelming, but while being overwhelmed, to put it together and organize it, because we've taken inventory. Part of my story is that being a college graduate, that I took on student loans and being in debt for this season of my life is a reality that I have to live in. I don't want to look at it. I want to put it aside, but the reality is I need to take inventory of what I have, though it may not be much, and organize in spite of being overwhelmed of our situations and our problems and our bills and whatever it may be, but also overwhelmed with what is God calling you to do. Sometimes it's outside of what we think we can do. Again, we know our have. We know what we have. And we know what we need. But sometimes what God's calling us to do almost seems impossible. And it's crazy to think the difference between having what we have and the difference between what we need, that the difference between the two can be filled depending on what we've sown and what we reap in the time, but our faith can fill that. Because then we're looking at this woman where her sons are about to be taken away. And Elijah is asking to go to your neighbors and borrow jars, and she's supposed to feel okay with this. Like, I'm going to not lose my sons if I just gather up all these jars and use this tiny little bottle, tiny little jar of oil to fill, what could I imagine is 3, 10, 100 jars. We don't know how it's going to happen. God asked Noah to build an ark. He didn't know how it was going to be built, but I could imagine, how am I supposed to get the wood? How am I supposed to get the animals together? How am I supposed to do all of this? But God's asking not the how, but can you let him do it through you? Not knowing how it'll be done, not knowing the answer, not knowing how our problems will be solved, how our finances will be taken care of. But are you going to be able to say, I can do it with God, I can do it through him? Are you going to let him work through you? Instead of asking the how, he's asking if you can do it through him. And now we've taken the situation, we've taken inventory, we've organized it despite being overwhelmed with everything around us. And we see that now what she has is enough. What she has is able to fill all those jars. So she did as she was told. Her sons kept bringing in the jars to her, and she filled one after another. Soon every container was full to the brim from a tiny little jar. Filled every single one. And again, with where we are, what you have, ask for God's blessing in it. Whether it be little, whether it be a lot. Take that small seed and bring it to God and ask, God, may you bless this. And see how planting the seed can bring out a multitude of fruits. Exponentially grow them. I was listening to one of the preachers, Michael Todd, I like to listen to, and he said one thing, right? 90% of what I have is better blessed than 100% of it without being blessed. And that's part of finance, is part of the situation that we're in, that tithing, that 10% It's part of being God. This belongs to you. This belongs to you, and I give it back. Give back the blessing that you've given me, so that whatever comes afterwards can continue to be a blessing. %90 of what I have is better blessed than the 100% of all of it without God. And in that way, we see with her, not enough was more than enough to do what she needed and then some. We see in verse 7 that it filled the